What a piece of shit. Hey Mitch, you got a forklift. Why are you lifting the quad? You got a forklift right there, man. How come you're not using the forklift? You'd probably be a lot easier on your back if you use the forklift. There's a forklift right there. Hey man, is your forklift out of propane or something? How come you're doing it this way? Maybe you should use the forklift. How come you're not using the forklift? I'd definitely use a forklift if I had a forklift. I don't know why you're not using the forklift. You should probably use a forklift. You just made that way harder by not using the forklift. And the sad part is you got a forklift. How come you're not using the forklift? You should definitely use the forklift. Now my wheel's caught up in the forklift that I should be using to put the quad on the table. Wasn't so bad. Ugh. All right, guys. So what we have here is a 525 Polaris Outlaw. This is the one with the straight axle. You could actually get these in an IRS, which is an independent rear suspension, in this same year. Now, I picked this up quite some time ago. I picked it up as a roller as the engine kind of blew up. I'm not sure if it dropped a valve or something, but I picked it up as a roller. It's been outside for a while, so it's kind of got some wear and tear on it, unfortunately. But my plan with this quad, I've always wanted to do a two-stroke hybrid quad build. I've always been real partial, and I've always had a soft spot for the TRX 250R. But those things are so expensive now. They're like hen's teeth. They're really, really hard to find in Newfoundland. And if I'm being quite honest with you, as I've got older, I've kind of lost interest in sport quads in general. So for me to go out and spend so much on a TRX 250R, I probably wouldn't ride it enough to really justify the price of it. So I want to build my own. Now, this isn't going to be like a bougie quad build, you know, where everything is powder coated different colors. We have sponsors and whatnot. This is kind of going to be a build for you guys that are kind of like myself that just want to make a really cool different quad and kind of doing it on a budget. So we're probably not going to take this super far. Now, the reason I actually went with this quad was one, that it popped up. It was fairly cheap here in Newfoundland. Two, it does have good bones because it does have full Fox suspension. As you can see, we have a dual rate spring up front. And these things were really light, which is kind of what the end goal is for this build. I kind of want to make a really, really light sport quad. To the point that I've always had 450s. If you've seen earlier in the video, you've probably seen the 660 Raptor that will come up eventually in another build series. I really just want to make a two-stroke, extremely light as I can get it. The goal is probably around 280 to 300 pounds for a race quad or a sport quad. And I think these weigh in roughly at around 365 to 370 pounds dry from factory. At least that's what Wikipedia says. So whatever I don't need on this, we're going to cut off the frame. We're going to just aim for the super, super light sport quad. And I think this will be really great bones for that. Now let me show you what we're going to put in this. Now let me just put this up on Barber Straw stand here. So what we have here, guys, is a 2000 KTM 250SX. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mitch, that bike looks pretty good. I don't really agree with you scrapping it. And if I'm being quite honest with you, I'm having an existential crisis here because everything I've ever rode, whether it be quad, UTV, dirt bikes are pretty much my favorite thing ever. Choose between any other form of recreation, quad, UTV, I'll always pick a dirt bike because I enjoy dirt bikes so much. So it's kind of breaking my heart to do this, but I really never fell in love with this bike. And let me tell you why I'm not totally in love with it. Before we strip this thing right down and I take the engine out and we do a little bit of backup, I want to give you the backbone and the backstory on this bike. So I picked this up probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, and a 2000 KTM 250SX, it's kind of rare in Newfoundland. I haven't seen a whole lot of these things. And if you're wondering, well, why did you go with the KTM 250SX? Well, the 525 that actually came out of those Polaris Outlaws were KTM manufactured. So I kind of wanted to keep it brand specific, brand loyal, I guess. If I would have had my time back knowing what I know now, I definitely would have just put whatever came up first, really. But I picked this up fairly cheap. I kind of got hosed on it, if I'm being quite honest with you. And I just was stubborn enough that I wasn't giving up on this engine. So it may look good from afar, but it's far from good. I mean, it got really nice anodized wheels, black XL rims. It looks good. It does look good. I will give you guys that. But the frame, it got a few cracks into it. It got odd hardware everywhere. It's a 24-year-old bike, I guess. Is it restorable? Yes, it is, but it's probably not the best candidate because just what was on the go with the engine. So when I picked this up, I got it non-running. So it was essentially a roller. I was assured that it had new piston and rings and new connecting rod. And when I actually went and seen the bike, it was very, very clean. You could see that it had all new gaskets throughout the engine, throughout the cases. So it was recently apart when I seen it. So I said, you know what? Maybe it's just a CDI. Maybe it's a coil. So once I got it home and started kind of inspecting it, I'm kind of glad it wasn't something as simple as a coil. And what I mean by that, I'm glad it was kind of a silver lining type scenario. If I would have put a coil on it and it would have fired, it probably would have lasted about 3 seconds and it would have just imploded anyways, and I would have just been throw it in the trash at that point. So what actually happened with this thing, the crank was so out of true because these have two-piece cranks. It was essentially making contact over here with the mag. And what it was doing, that a crank can either be twisted this way or it can be cranked this way. And it was cranked this way. So to the point that over here, when the stub out would come along with your woodruff key, it would actually almost make contact with the magneto to the point that it would just ground out, for lack of a better term, and it wouldn't create spark, it wouldn't create signal, I guess I should be saying properly. And that's how bad this was. Now on this side, there's actually a gear that comes off this side of your crankshaft that runs your transmission. It was so out of true that this gear over here actually made contact with the case to the point that it actually made a nice little divot in the inner side of our case. This engine, if I'm being quite honest with you, it's hurt, but we rebuilt it. We kind of TIG welded a lot of things. We machined a lot of things. And we just never gave up onto it. I guess between myself and my father, we're kind of stubborn people. It was living again whether it wanted to or not. So I'm going to strip all this thing down. We're going to take that motor back out, and I'm going to mock it up in our quad. I managed to get some of it in the pan anyways. Not all of it, but some of it. I even got some coolant in the pan, believe it or not. Not very much, but we got a little bit of coolant in the pan. All right, so I think we're ready to come out here with this engine. It's not really a whole lot to them. They're pretty straightforward. I've had this one in and out a couple times. Just a little bit of jiggling, a little bit of wiggling. And we're out. Alright guys, so I went ahead and laid this motor in the frame of our Polaris Outlaw here, and it's actually fitting pretty good. This swing arm bolt is actually the right diameter to fit in here. It's a nice tight snug fit, so that worked out fairly easily. If you come back here though, of course, I am going to have to make some bushings on either side, which is pretty straightforward. I wanted to put the chain on, of course, just because I don't want this thing eating sprockets or kind of popping off when we're under power or under load, because that's just going to hurt the cases quite a bit. So I've kind of just laid the chain in place just to get the eyeball, just to make sure that we're not totally out to lunch on that. But for the most part, it's not so bad. If you look in here, this is your factory mounting point here for your factory 525 engine, and our factory point for our 250 engine is right there. So it's actually not too far off, but I think what I'll end up doing, if you can get it there, yep. But I think what I'll end up doing, I'll probably end up putting a piece of pipe from this frame rail to that frame rail and come off that with 2 new tabs. I think that will be the strongest and the easiest way to go about that, instead of trying to use those. We also have another point here on the engine I want to hit, so I'm not sure if I'm going to come off of these and just do kind of a weird bend and catch that mounting point. Haven't really decided on that one yet. There's also one up here on top of the engine that I'm thinking I may end up probably putting a bar from here probably into there, and I'll probably put a couple mounting points here because I do want to utilize the factory mounts that came off the dirt bike, because if I hard mount this engine, you'll never get the engine out again if anything ever happens. We want to be able to remove something so we can kind of slide this engine out again, and I think that's what I'm going to try to do. Now, another issue that we're going to run into, of course, and this is something that I've always thought about, and I've always wondered what guys that have built similar quads, how do they get around it? Our kickstart. We're going to be really close to our frame here, and we're not going to get very much of a kick with this engine the way it is. Right now, we're kind of jammed up there now. But we do have to take this engine and clock that a bit further down just to get the proper head angle. And I'm hoping that's going to give me a bit more clearance, and I can also clock it here a little bit further. Hopefully with those two little adjustments, I'm hoping I'm going to get it. Not really sure, but we're going to try it. As for the exhaust, that one's going to be a feat in itself, of course. I'm probably going to end up just making my own chamber, at least right to here. Hopefully I can kind of come down, wrapping around here somewhere without, coming in contact with our A-arms, and then back up around and center exit if I could do it, because these things came with center exits. On top of that as well, it's actually not too bad. Hopefully we can route these from our magneto up around here, and probably I can mount everything here really factory-like. I'm hoping. I want to try to save this radiator. That's the factory 525 radiator, so that should be more than enough cooling for this little 250. Of course, we have our carb that has to go here, so I really have to watch where I'm going to be mounting things. As for an airbox, I'll try to save probably the factory plastic one that came with the 525, but I got a funny feeling I'm probably going to make my own aluminum one, just to get that out of the weather and everything like that. Now, if you're noticing, another thing, if you guys work on these engines, are these head studs. Now, this here is your factory bolt, of course. When I actually picked this bike up, I never noticed it. I don't know why I never noticed it, but I didn't notice that they just had a 3/8 bolt in place of the factory hardware. And the factory hardware is kind of like a fine thread bolt. It bites really good, but a 3/8 bolt, it wasn't threaded all the way. It wasn't tapped properly. So that was our fix. The proper way to do this is a jug. All the jugs that I found, or cylinder head, I call these jugs, but the factory cylinder heads or the jugs that I've seen on eBay and stuff, they're literally more than what I paid for the dirt bike. So that was our way of getting around that. And that kind of gives me a theme or a name for this whole build. So if you ever watched Frankenstein's Monster, if you ever watched Frankenstein, that old horror film, I think there's a couple new renditions of that film. But anyways, Frankenstein Monster always had these like studs coming out of his neck. And as soon as we done that, that's kind of what it reminded me of. So I've dubbed this whole build Kreature with a K for KTM. So this is a Kreature build. I guess I'm Fowlerstein or Frankenstein or whatever. That's what we're going to name this build. It's going to be called Kreature. And that's why, because of those head studs. From here on in, I guess I'm going to have to kind of center this motor, make sure it's in its right home there, this way. And then I'm probably going to have to make these shims, I guess, first. Then with that taken care of, I can kind of get a better feel of where my tab's got to go. I think what I'm going to end up doing first and foremost, I'll probably take the engine back out again, take this chain off, and I'm going to cut these off, cut that off, and I'm probably going to see if I got a piece of pipe here that I can weld in place right here, and then my two tabs can come off that. So these are the factory engine mounts that came with the 525 Outlaw. I'm going to take this bar, probably just cope that out, weld it in here, but I'm going to cut these off first, get rid of these. This is going to allow me to put this in place and blow out a couple of tabs on my CNC table. Then I can mount those to the motor, put the motor back in place and tack it, then take the motor back out and finalize the welding, and then we'll have this mount done. This mount will be done. I also kind of cut these aluminum bushings just for now, just to fit in here like so, just so it'll give us our mock-up purposes. The final rendition, when we go to put that motor in finally, I'm just going to I'll probably make these bushings right here just all one piece with the proper measurement, and I'll just make them here on the lathe. But for now, just to get us kind of rolling, kind of get us in position where we need to be, this is going to be the best way to go about it. So we're going to work on cutting these out, grind this off, and putting this one back in. So check this out, guys. This is essentially where this engine is going to be living. I went ahead and tacked in our tabs down here. They're just tacked in preliminary because I wanted to see what type of angle this was going to be on. Now, I don't know how I feel about this angle because this is the exact angle it was in the bike before I actually took it out of the KTM 250SX frame. I actually put an angle finder right here on this flat spot of the case. And this is exactly where it was in the bike, but it looks kind of drastically tipped ahead to me. So I may make these tabs a little bit longer, actually go back this way, and hopefully this will give me some more clearance here because it looks like this will be a drastic wear point right now, this chain, just the way this is. I think if I angle it up just a touch, I may get a little bit of stress relief off this plastic chain guard. But other than that, guys, I'm actually pretty impressed with how light this thing is right now. One issue I knew we were going to run into, like I say, we clocked the engine ahead where it sat in the dirt bike, but we're still going to be having an issue right here with this, and I kind of figured that. I tried to clock it a little bit further ahead, but it just wouldn't allow me. I'm right into the frame. Now, I don't really want to go modifying the frame just because this is a very structural component, especially where your swing arm bolts to, and this is your swing arm mount, so I don't really want to be, chopping this out and making clearances. I guess worst comes to worst, I could, but I'm going to try to think if I can modify this or if I can make my own kickstand, or kickstart, I should say. The pipe itself, that's going to be its own drastic thing. Hopefully I can come out here, probably come through here a little bit, and then straight up. I'm hoping. I'm not really sure on that one. Let me just show you how light this thing is. So guys, I realize that, there's no fluids in this thing. The plastics aren't on it. We don't have a pipe into it. We don't have exhaust system, carb, gas tank, plastics, blah, blah, blah. But this is essentially where the bulk of the weight comes from on these things. Now, as for the frame that your seat sits on back here, this is actually all aluminum as well on this bike, so that's very light as well. But you had to think about it as well, that we're losing electric start, we're losing batteries, we're losing a lot of different components here that the 4-stroke required. There's also a lot of brackets here that the 525 needed for different things. And I'm going to be cutting those off because I'm going to be trying to make this thing as light as possible. But just check out how light this is. Now, I'm not a super strong guy, but I can pretty much lift all that. It's probably about 150 pounds. So with all the extra weight onto it, I can see this being like mid 250 to 280. I think it's going to be very, very light. Now, that engine, I believe, in that year was making right around 45 horsepower, 46-ish maybe. I think with the power to weight ratio of this thing, I think it's going to be an extremely, extremely fun sport quad. So it is actually the next day, guys, and I actually stayed a couple hours last night in the shop just to kind of mock up where I want the whole electrical system to kind of live its life. And I wanted to see if I had to make any splices and cables or wires. And everything right now, where I have everything placed and mocked up very loosely, everything kind of plugs and plays, and there's nothing stressed. There's no kinks in electrical systems or anything like that. So I'm actually really happy at where that's going to live its life. I also went ahead and made the front engine mounts as well. They came out great. Made that out of 1/8 plate as well. So I think the next biggest task we have with this thing, or a couple biggest tasks, is the exhaust pipe and our Kickstarter. I think that's what we're going to focus on today, because I don't want to shoot myself in the foot because it's been going so great, but up until this point, it's been pretty easy. I mean, all we done, we put a few shims in, we put a couple of steel brackets in, a piece of pipe, and the engine has found its home. So I think it's time to address the two elephants in the room and get the exhaust pipe routed, which is going to be really weird with that exhaust chamber, and figure out something with our kickstart. I think that's going to be a big issue as well. I may have to design my own or drastically modify that one, I guess. So let's start in at the exhaust pipe. All right, guys, let's talk about our two-stroke expansion pipe here just a little bit. This is actually the expansion pipe that came out of our two-stroke 250 dirt bike. Well, pieces of it. Unfortunately, I had to chop it up to make it fit into our 525 frame, because it just wouldn't fit in that frame, the orientation that this was in from the dirt bike. So let me just give it to you in layman's terms, because I'm a local layman. Why it's shaped this way and why it is a chambered exhaust. Now, you'll only find these on two strokes, and the reason they're shaped this way, they'll actually harness the sound waves to suck the cylinder clean of spent gases, and in the process drawing fresh air gas mixture into the chamber itself, and then stuff all the charge back into the cylinder, filling it to a greater pressures than can be achieved by simply venting it to atmosphere. And I promise I didn't get that offline. Now, guys, as you can see, I have that initial first piece. I believe the best spot to start is the beginning. So what I'm probably going to have to do is cut this flange off here. We're probably going to end up coming around the frame like so. Then we're going to have to be straight as possible and kind of come up this way. And I think this bigger piece here is probably going to live its life right here somewhere. And we just kind of have to fill in the middle piece, unfortunately. So I think that's the best way, and that's the only way we're going to get this to really work. I'm going to try to keep it as tight to the engine, I think, as possible, just to give us some more clearance on our kickstart, because that's going to go in there. But like I previously stated, we are going to have to do some drastic things to this kickstart. I'm going to have to make my own. I'm probably going to end up cutting this off, probably trying to save this piece down here, and probably trying to weld another piece, a straighter piece, probably kick it out here so we can get away from our frame. So this is definitely going to have to be modified for sure. But let's just start right from the beginning and see if we can get that pipe in here. So guys, this is going to be our pipe that actually comes from the head. Our flange is going to be right around here somewhere. And this is our extension piece. This is our piece that's going to go in around our frame of our quad. And I just kind of flared the end of that just so it would make a really nice transition piece into this piece right here. And I'm actually pretty impressed with how that came out. I think that's going to be really nice fit for a weld. And I think that'll look pretty factory-ish. So this is how far we've come with our exhaust so far. As you can see, this is going to take a little bit more hammering and dollying, but it will come out as a nice uniform kind of bend. Along when I MIG weld that. I made a relief cut in here that was going to kind of fold up, and we're going to weld. This here is the piece that we actually flanged out over in the bench vise. And this is actually the piece that connects to the muffler. Now, as you can see, I had to cut out this kind of bend here. Now, I want to get this back because this is quite a bit of volume in this pipe. But unfortunately, where it has this bend, I can't really cut it and save it to the point that I need a straight piece out of this. I could probably just cut a little sliver out of it, but by the time I mess with that, it's not going to give me much volume back. So I think what I'm going to try to do is utilize this. Now, this is a 5-inch exhaust out of I think it's a 5.9 Cummins diesel. I think this is quite a bit heavier than this pipe, unfortunately, but I do have to cut quite a bit out of it. Probably pie cut this down a little bit so I can get to this diameter here, and kind of pie cut up to get to this diameter, because this is quite a bit bigger than here. As you could probably see, I believe it fits inside. So what I'll end up doing is just like you say, putting a little pie cut in this so I can shrink that up on this end, and it will be the same diameter on both ends. So far, it is fitting pretty well. I am going to have to cut this piece off as well and kind of reposition that, but that's to be expected. But I'm pretty happy with how that bend came out when I kind of hammer and dolly all this in and kind of get it as uniform as possible, and then put a nice MIG weld around that. I think that'll come out really, really nice. We are going to have to do a little bit more hammering, of course, but that being said, I think we're on the right path. This is what I kind of meant by making a cone. As you can see, I took a few pie cuts out of this thing. As you can see by this leftover material. And I kind of just made it into a cone shape. Now by making it into a cone shape, you actually lose your roundness or your diameter. As you can see, it's kind of more of an egg shaped, or it's just not really round. So I will have to kind of flatten that out. If you come in here and kind of look, this is going to fit here really, really great. I'll probably end up putting this seam on the back side just because it won't be so visible then. It'll look nice. But now with that being said, there is a seam right here on the factory, so maybe I will put the seam here. Not really sure. I'll figure that out as the time comes. But this side diameter now is probably around 4.5. This side's probably around 3.5. So it'll fit into this side, and it'll kind of fit into this side really, really nice as well. Once again, we do have quite a bit of cleanup here. There's a lot of hammering, there's a lot of MIG welding and stuff that got to be still happening here, but we're on the right path. Unfortunately, that is a little bit heavier than I wanted. I guess it is what it is. Essentially, this piece here weighs the same as this piece, so at least it'll never rot out, I guess. What we're going to end up doing is I'm going to weld this out, probably tack all this in place, finish welding everything out. I think then what I might actually try to do is blast this, take all this black coating off. Maybe I'll come in here with a torch and see if I can get that heat marks like you see on some of the dirt bike stuff. But that's jumping way ahead of myself. Let's get this tacked up and fitted and make sure we have a great fit before we go that far. This is our pipe. Essentially, this is where it's going to live. I got a little bit of movement here, as you can see. Kind of comes out of the head, kind of goes down in around that frame right there. We have clearance there, comes up and out the tailpipe. Now, of course, this is what I meant by this was going to be our issue. So I'm going to have to make something there. Now, once I have this up out of the way, it's not so bad. So probably what I'm going to end up doing is clocking this a little bit different. I've already tried to clock it ahead. So even if I keep it in this area here, probably come up with a smaller one. Maybe I can cut this one off and design something on the table. Probably cut it out of like 1 inch thick or 3/4 inch thick aluminum. Weld it to here and just try my luck and see how long that lasts. Because not really sure how that one's going to pan out, but this is kind of where we're heading. I think it looks pretty badass for now. The exhaust line kind of follows the frame line, and you know what I mean? Looks pretty cool. Now there's still, once again, I need to put a stub out here to put in my muffler. Maybe I'll hang my muffler and then see where I have to kind of join that up. But yeah, it's coming along, guys. So I'm actually going to go ahead, weld all that out, probably hang the muffler and probably finish that exhaust. But you guys are going to have to wait for the next episode to see how this is going to turn out. So if you like this, like, subscribe, shoot me a comment for sure. Let me know what you guys think of it, where I should kind of mount a few things. If you have an idea about that Kickstarter, let me know. But that's going to be a wrap for today's video. Appreciate you guys tuning in again today. I'll see you on the next one. Jeez, you guys are still here. You're really wanting to be curious about the pipe, aren't you guys? All right, well, this is kind of how it came out. Still have a lot of cleanup, a lot of polishing. I'm going to kind of glue these welds with a little bit of propane or something, but there's still a few little jagged edges here. I'll show you what it looks like on the bike scenes you're here. So this is the kind of finished result. I got kind of a lot of polishing left. There's a little bit of dings here I want to get out. Also got to put a piece on here to get to our muffler, but our muffler is going to be right around here somewhere. And yeah, there's a couple more tabs for our spring tabs. So that's it. That's all I'm showing you guys. Get out. Go on. You're out of here.